Good evening and welcome to Transistance, your weekly news and commentary show dealing with subjects from around the world that impact the trans and trans adjacent community. I'm one of your co hosts, Genevieve Bergman.
And I'm your other host, Emily. I hope you all are having a great night tonight. I know it's Boxing Day for most of us, the day after Christmas. I told my girlfriend, happy, boring, regular day. Because it's just funny, you know, how you go from all of the anticipation and just kind of tenseness of the buildup of Christmas, and then it's over in a 24-hour period. And it's just like, okay, I guess it's time to take down the tree and quit playing the Christmas music. It's all over now, and it's
Yeah,
very anticlimactic.
yeah, and that's one of the things that ruins Christmas for me, among others.
What, just the fact that it's the one day?
Yeah, the build up and then the kind of over in one shot.
Yeah. Well, let's try and make it fun again. We give people a reason to celebrate today. It is Transistance Day, so there we go.
Yep,
Happy Transistance Day to y'all. Uh,
indeed.
we had a fun 6-hour Christmas stream yesterday, giving people a place to be that didn't have a place. So it's awesome to have y'all here with us again tonight. Let's go ahead and jump into our first story. Trying to remember. I'm producing the show tonight, so I'm trying to remember what all my keys are here. Ken Paxton is looking for ways to block the trans sanctuary bill that California just passed. What's going on here, Genevieve?
Yeah, so this is actually not as late breaking as I thought it was. On December 22nd, Ken Paxton tweeted out a message that said that Texas should know about California's SB 107B4. It goes into effect on January 1st. SB 107 is a bill authored by Representative Scott Wiener from California, and it has to do with creating a sanctuary refuge state in California for anyone who may be fleeing a state where either a child or an adult might be threatened with legal actions, criminal actions in the case of gender affirming care. So if a child were to be targeted by the Texas um, Department of Children's Welfare as a recipient of gender affirming care, and there was a threat to take that child away from their parents, and the parents flee to California, there would be no recourse for Texas at that time because California is creating a boundary that says that that is going to be a refuge state in that case. Ken Paxton is threatening to find a way to intervene with California's law because he feels like it is a threat to Texas sovereignty. He believes that California has no right to stop Texas from pursuing an individual into California and taking them into custody. Now, California disagrees, of course,
Hmm.
but one of the main issues that Ken Paxton has is if a person goes to California who is a minor and has a trans affirming procedure of any sort while in California, then he believes that that person who is a minor will somehow be able to avoid having parental informed consent. And this is a thing where I believe that he's read a lot into this law, and he does believe that this is going to be a matter of state versus state, and he's looking to make this as big of a fight as possible because it is his wish to somehow criminalize transgender people as much as he can. Right?
Mm-hmm. 'Cause- 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 'cause
Audio's dead.
Darn it. I said a lot of really important and impactful comments.
Yep. And now you have to reconstruct all of those in the time that it's going to take you to rebuild the audio.
I was just saying that he's using that false argument again that it's taking away parents' rights because somehow, like you said, kids will be able to go to California and get gender affirming care from doctors without parental consent, without even parental knowledge, and the parents can't find out about it. And of course, that's not at all what the law is saying or what the intent of it is. And medical professionals in California still follow proper procedure for that sort of stuff, and get
Right.
parental consent for minors. But it's just, it's you can see the state versus state implications of this law because, Texas is trying to eliminate transgender affirming care for anybody, basically, specifically with minors, and they're doing it by the fear mongering the parents and this rhetoric of the kids will be able to do it without your consent or without your knowledge even is, again, like I said, it's just irresponsible fear mongering.
Yeah, and that's the wider image of what is being portrayed by many of these states. Texas is just the biggest attention grabber, that because schools are indoctrinating kids into sexual or gender identity politics, then the parents don't have direct influence in the school to control the message. And then kids can go to their doctor and the parents don't have to be included in that conversation. So therefore, the doctor is now able to conspire against the parents, and then they can go to another state and they can have these procedures done without their parents' knowledge. What they're trying to do is they're trying to highlight some strange alien idea that we are somehow trying to prevent kids and parents from talking about their own needs and health care. What we are wanting to do is we are wanting to really give all LGBTQ plus people the space that they can discover their own identity. And if they have a family who is affirming or at least accepting and willing to provide them the safest place for them to discover their own identity, then absolutely let's keep these families working together toward this same goal. If a family is abusive in the sense that they are going to harm their child, they are going to demean or belittle their child, they are going to physically, mentally, or emotionally commit violence against their child, no, we don't want that child to have access to that family, because in any other abuse situation, they would need to be removed and provided safety.
Mhm.
That's the only logic that we're following here.
Yeah, there's just so much stickiness in that because of what they say about trans affirming parents, parents that affirm their trans kids. They're considering that to be the abuse of parents against kids. They're
Exactly.
It's one of those situations where they're attacking the trans community from every angle, saying that we're just groomers, and then they say that parents that allow their kids to do it are child abusers, and then now they're claiming that kids are gonna try and do it without parental consent, and it's just like which one is it? Like, pick a bad guy, because you can't say that everybody in the world is the bad guy.
Right. But
And yet they do.
if they can make transgender people, LGBTQ plus people, the bad guy, they can rally the greatest number of support because it's been a group that has been targeted for the last 30 years.
Mhm. I was hoping to get our cameras are a little. I had everything set up, I thought, but Jeannie's off to the left. I'm off to the right, and it's like, here I
Do I
can.
need to scooch?
fix that a little bit, but I'll get you fixed on the next story. Scotland and Spain moved to simplify legal gender changes. This is good news.
This is very good news. We've been talking about Scotland and the work of trying to have um, gender change and gender recognition sort of fast tracked in Scotland so that people who want to work to officially change their gender will be able to do that in a much simpler fashion. Scotland is the first nation in the UK to make legal gender change easier. And that change can be done in very little time. There's been a lot of studies done on how long that process has taken in Scotland and in the UK, and it's years sometimes before some people, the majority of people, just give up and they don't even bother trying to get their gender recognized.
Mm.
But now we're seeing Scotland making steps. There is a hurdle to this, though. Scotland can do this, but they need the UK's final approval. And that is where there's a huge, huge barrier. There are already talks of people from the UK who are basically saying that there is going to be no allowance for this in the UK, that the UK will not recognize the changes that Scotland is doing, that there will be no accommodations for any of the changes that are going to happen in Scotland. So it looks like this is going to be quite a battle. And Scotland was only able to do this after a lot of problems. There were protesters who broke into the chambers and interrupted the proceedings. Those who were against the gender recognition changes also kept just throwing amendment after amendment and trying to filibuster this thing so that maybe it would just run out of time and they couldn't actually get it passed. But even with all of that, the Scotland legislature decided to pass the gender recognition changes. Now, in Spain, it's slightly different because what this is going to do is without really any without any real barriers like Scotland is looking at, they have passed it from one house going to the second house. And this is going to allow transgender people in Spain over the age of 16 it gives them the opportunity to update their gender marker and name based on a simple request. It won't require paperwork. It won't require any, jumping through hoops. It will not require going before a judge to have it done. They will just be able to go into their official documents place and request that name change. Now, the request for that will have to be verified after the fact, but it will make this completely easier for transgender people in Spain to have their gender recognized in official documentation. Now, anyone from 16 and up will be able to do that, but people as young as 12 will also be able to do it under certain conditions. So, I mean, we're talking kids as young as 12 being able to be officially recognized for their identity. And Spain is leading the charge right now on this. This is fabulous work for them, and we hope Spain continues to make great examples for the rest of the world to follow.
Yeah, basically we're at a point where we just need someone to take a lead and to essentially get to a point where we've got some good data on what happens when you do some of these things, because Americans are just so skeptical about these things. They've been so whipped up by the fear mongering that it's hard for them to trust anything. And so hopefully, like, some of these other countries can show, hey, if you do this, the world won't end. There will still be people procreating and doing all the things that you're saying will never happen again if we allow people to identify different ways.
Absolutely.
All right, let's see. Okay, I can see how my mic is hitting a little hotter than Jeannie, so there we go. I'm adjusting it back down. I thought I had us in the right spot, but I've gotten some comments about misbalanced audio. So we'll move on to our next story. Let's see. Can I do that from here? Yeah, I can. All right. it's a lot of things going on. So in that you covered the things that the Tories
Yep.
and with the filibustering and all that
Yeah.
crap. Okay. So we'll move on to our next story, which is Netanyahu. Benjamin Netanyahu has rebuked a far-right ally for anti-LGBT comments. What's going on here? This sounds pretty good.
This is good, but it should be received with a lot of caution. Benjamin Netanyahu is the designated prime minister of Israel. And we know that Netanyahu is building a coalition of far right groups and ultranationalist groups, Zionist groups, to kind of move forward in his image of what Israel should be. And some of those groups that he is associating with are definitely anti-LGBTQ plus. In the last few weeks, there have been members of organizations that are associated with this confederation that Netanyahu has put together who have made some very clear anti-LGBTQ plus statements. Benjamin Netanyahu came out and made a very clear statement that remarks such as these are unacceptable to me and to members of Likud. It does not, the coalition agreement does not allow discrimination against LGBTQ or harming their right to receive services like all other Israeli citizens. And this is the one that I think we need to receive with a little bit of caution. In the country that I will lead, says Netanyahu, there will be no situation where a person, whether he is LGBT, Arab, or ultra Orthodox, or any other person, will enter a hotel and not receive service, enter a doctor and not receive service. So Netanyahu is going to have to sell a very huge bill to a group of ultranationalists, Zionists, and far right individuals to say, hey, look, you're going to have to allow Arab individuals into your property and not discriminate against them. You're going to have to talking to those who are definitely on the anti-LGBTQ plus side of things is like you cannot discriminate against this group of people. So I'm graciously optimistic that maybe Benjamin Netanyahu is actually going to make a difference in Israel, but I'm not going to I'm going to reserve some of that optimism and say it's still a long shot.
All right, I need to take a quick break. There is something going on with our headlines and our images that things are getting off out of whack and they should not be. So I just got to check on something real fast. We'll take a quick break and will be right back. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for hanging around. I didn't get an ad played while I was doing that, but we'll we'll take a break in the middle and fix that as well. I I forget how much there is to do when you've got to produce the show and be on the show and handle everything all at the same time. It's a lot of work. I'm glad that Kari usually helps us, but she's out visiting friends for Christmas, so I'm glad that she is able to have the night off. She's there in chat, I think, still. Ukraine passes a bill banning the LGBTQ hate speech in media. That sounds good. What's going on here, and why did this come about?
This is a step forward for Ukraine. So Ukrainian lawmakers passed a bill that basically would allow a ban on hate speech and incitement based upon sexual orientation or gender identity. It was approved on December 15th, and it will be going into effect. And essentially, what this will do is it will allow the government to step in and say, look, this is not allowed. If there's hate speech in the media, if there is any type of incitement to violence toward the LGBTQ plus community in Ukraine through media, the government can step in and say, no, this is against law, and shut it down. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has indicated that he is all for same-sex civil partnerships and maybe even move towards same-sex marriage. We do know that there are different forms of discrimination that have been already dealt with in Ukraine, but there are also issues of equal rights and human rights for some LGBTQ members in Ukraine. So this is a nice step forward on the part of the Ukrainian government, but at the same time, I think that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, and there are a lot of organizations that are looking to Zelensky to say, all right, are you going to follow through to the promise you made to Joe Biden and President Biden when you came in, last week, where you said you're going to be working on creating more of a welcoming environment for LGBTQ plus people. So it's going to be interesting. I think Ukraine, it has a lot on its plate right now. So the fact that they would pass this bill while also trying to fend off a hostile invasion from Russia says a lot.
It does. I asked you kind of why this is happening now. It seems like like odd timing. Yes, I know it's important to protect trans people. Like I'm all about that, or LGBT folks, same-sex unions, things like that. All the things that we're always fighting for here, but they're in a tough time right now with that Russian invasion, and I just find it really interesting that they were able to get this through, considering the all hands on deck situation they have there.
Well, I think a huge selling point for the legislature to do this would be the $1.85 billion package that we have given to Ukraine, including a Patriot missile battery for defense purposes. So I can see maybe them saying, hey, look, we're going to pass this bill and maybe enforce this for a little while. But yeah, we're going to get missiles out of this.
Let's see, can't get it. There we go. Next up, the Biden administration chooses not to appeal Texas's anti-trans ruling, and Ken Paxton's pretty happy about that. This is the anti-trans workers bill, right? That employers have the ability to discriminate against trans folks.
Right. This was the push that the Biden administration made to eliminate workplace discrimination against LGBTQ plus persons, especially and particularly transgender people. But U.S. District Judge Matthew Kaczmarek had put a hold on that, had pretty much, said, no, this is too broad. You can't come in here and say this. You cannot do this because it's overstepping the bounds. The Biden administration had the opportunity to appeal Kaczmarek's objection, but they chose to allow the deadline to pass, and therefore Kaczmarek's decision stands, so that there are no workplace protections for people in the state of Texas specifically, but this is definitely going to impact wider, you know, areas of the country. Now, that sounds like it's a loss. It sounds like, that Ken Paxton and the Texas anti-LGBTQ movement have won, but I think there is hope that there may be a different tact on this, just as there was a different attack on protecting same-sex marriage by not fighting it in the court, but by creating legislation around it. So maybe we're going to see something from the Democrats who are going to try to push forth some form of broadened employment discrimination protections. We may be seeing something a little more pointed at Texas. We don't know, but let's hope that the Biden administration has something up their sleeves right now for that.
Yeah, that's great. The article did, and from when I skimmed it, was alluding to that there are other ways that they're going to fight back against it. So
Yeah.
I tend to believe that they'll do something to make sure that there is some protection against this.
Right.
Let's see. Oh no, that doesn't allow me to change the headline. Trying to do this more subtly, but we got to do it this way. Congress increased funding for funding to end HIV, but still fell short with that. What happened here?
So the latest appropriations bill for the Department of Health and Human Services included an additional $100 million for trying to work toward ending the HIV epidemic. Now, $100 million is a great step in the right direction when you're on the lower end of that looking up. But when you are on the end of those organizations that are looking for funding to actually eliminate the scourge of HIV, it's a $9.8 billion project, and $100 million doesn't even scratch an itch in this case. So, we are, and that was just the PrEP initiative. That was to get PrEP into more hands, $9.8 billion. When we're looking at the overall goal of removing HIV by 2030, we have 7 years to go. And this is going to talk about billion upon billion upon billion of dollars. And so 100 million at this point is not even getting us in a real sort of momentum phase working to eliminate HIV. There have been some great strides that we have seen. We have PrEP. We have some other forms of treatments that will prevent the spread of HIV. We do know people who have been living with this disease for over 40 years. The statistics say that since 1981, 700,000 people have died from HIV/AIDS, but according to the CDC, 1.1 million people are currently living with it. So we are looking at right now more people living with HIV than those who have died because of it. So that gives us a little bit of hope, but we want to see more. We want to see more from this administration. We want to see more from this this push to try to eliminate this disease. So $100 million sounds like a nice lead in, but it's not even close enough for a good start.
And have you done much research into why they say that eliminating HIV entirely within 8 years is even possible? What is it that what has come forth as far as breakthroughs with this that put that in the crosshairs of an actual possibility?
No, that is not at all. That's not at all what was behind this. What was behind this was basically the Kennedy promise that in 10 years we would have a man on the moon. We've seen this a number of times since the days of Kennedy, that there is a goal that looks insurmountable, that is tossed out in front of the people, yet it gives a great hope. It gives a great momentum. So, Kennedy says by the end of this decade, we are going to have someone on the moon. We were able to accomplish that as a country. We saw scientific advancement in the first 5 years of 1960 that made it possible to put, Neil Armstrong on the moon in 1969. and they achieved that goal. Yet in this case, we're not seeing the same amount of momentum moving in the direction of ending HIV/AIDS. Right now, we still have the biggest hurdle of all, and that is getting the pharmaceutical companies to play along.
Mhm.
Because as long as pharmaceutical companies feel like they have an open season to set the market wherever they want it, we are not going to see HIV eradicated. We're not even going to see it dented into because, quite honestly, with 1.1 million people currently living with the disease, they have more incentive to keep doing the life sustaining medicines than they do the eradication medicines.
But I guess essentially with PrEP and the success rate of PrEP protecting against the spread of HIV, that if enough people have it and take it regularly, then that would sort of, the natural result of that would be essentially the eradication of the disease, correct?
No, because according to the CDC, a quarter of new infections are transmitted by people who are not even aware that they have a positive status.
Hmm.
So we're looking at there's no real way that we're going to see the eradication unless there is an aggressive step in that direction of
Hmm.
finding a way to counteract the virus and eliminating those numbers.
Hmm. Yeah, because right now it's in the hands of the individuals, right? Getting tested regularly and using PrEP to make sure that you're not spreading or not contracting.
Yeah.
And yeah, that I guess apparently that puts too much of the responsibility in too many people's hands. Whereas, if we can find an inoculation against it or something like this, that would be the way we would truly achieve an eradication.
Right. I mean, moving toward a vaccine would be the biggest step that
Mm,
we could make. For example, a um, you know, mpox. We're seeing, that um, disease getting, some traction in trying to be defeated through medical means. We've had COVID, a lot of steps moving along, trying to stay ahead or at least catch up with the COVID virus and how it mutates into its different forms.
mm,
HIV has been one of those things that it's been a landmine for people to step into because just the idea of dealing with a population that has been stigmatized and dealing with a population has that still carries that stigma is quite possibly, one of the greatest. I saw a quote from oh shoot um, ah the actress Sharon, oh shit, Basic Instinct,
Sharon Stone?
Sharon Stone, saying that her AIDS activism cost her career. That she was out in front, fighting for awareness, increasing awareness, and trying to get people to contribute to that. And her career was taking a downward slide at the same time she was out there doing that.
Hmm.
So we can see that even allies who are fighting for it were fighting an uphill battle against popularity. They were fighting against, you know, the the idea of, creating a space of compassion for people with HIV/AIDS. So I think we're still seeing some of that. I think we're still seeing that stigma existing, and I think that we don't have we don't have enough popular support to push for that.
Mhm. Well, it's at least encouraging that we have things like PrEP and I there are ads and stuff out there about remembering to get tested. So hopefully we'll lick it eventually. Maybe we'll get some more funding at some point.
Well, don't even get me started on PrEP because that's a whole nother platform of issues because the variance on cost of that
Hmm.
for me to get PrEP would be somewhere around $240 a month.
Wow. it's out of reach of a lot of people.
Mhm.
Moving on to our next story here. Former former BFFs Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert are publicly feuding. Um, are they former BFFs? And what are they feuding about here?
Well, they were at the very beginning. They were they were chummy, but now things have definitely taken a slide. There was a little bit of a kerfluffle a little bit earlier in the year where they kind of took some pot shots at each other,
Mhm.
and so they've kind of been avoiding each other. But now we're seeing that maybe the possibility of these two being allies with each other just completely falling apart. So, um, first of all, Lauren Boebert made a comment wherein um, she was talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene's endorsement of House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. So Lauren Boebert supports the idea or opposes the idea to McCarthy stepping up into this position unless he agrees to a list of demands, including reinstating a rule allowing any Republican House member to call for his ouster. So basically, they're saying, we'll vote, these six Republicans are saying, we'll vote for you to be Speaker, but you have to acquiesce to certain demands, including our ability to remove you from your position that we're granting you. So Lauren says, I've been aligned with Marjorie and accused of believing a lot of the things that she believes in. I don't believe in this, just like I don't believe in Russian space lasers, Jewish space lasers, and all of this. Meaning that Marjorie has, endorsed Kevin McCarthy and is willing to lift him out without all of these restrictions. So Marjorie heard about this and
Uh-oh.
said, I've supported and donated to Lauren Boebert. President Trump has supported and donated to Lauren Boebert. Kevin McCarthy has supported and donated to Lauren Boebert. She just barely came through with 500 votes. So smacking Lauren back for the 500 votes difference in her win in the most recent midterm election. So Lauren came back at her. Um, you know, but it's a matter of these two just not wanting to be associated with each other, at least publicly. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but obviously, right up front, it looks like that maybe they don't want to be working with each other.
Mhm. Well, it's really interesting to watch as the party starts to kind of fracture a little bit. As you know, there was the first bit of the big lie followers, the election deniers, versus the realists, the ones who
Right.
admitted that the election was real and fair and legal, all of those things. And then, Kevin McCarthy, some of the things that Marjorie Taylor Greene has said, we're seeing people start to separate from each other. And it's really kind of interesting as we're inching closer to the next set of elections in 2024, what the Republican Party will look like when some of this dust settles, or if they're still in the midst of this kind of inner turmoil at that point.
It's tough because there's 2 years until the next major election, and as of right now, the Republican Party is split, and there's a lot of talk about this split is going to become more official in that we're going to see the Republican Party fall apart. We do know that the MAGA party, the ones who support Donald Trump, who are still, rah-rahing for Donald Trump, are losing a lot of ground and voice within the Republican Party. But at the same time, in the public, they are holding on to a lot of public support. And so it's going to be fun to watch the Republican Party as it sort of tears each other apart.
All right, so this one's gonna be fun. I like this one. The former president promises to fight for gay Republicans despite his contrary track record. I don't know.
This one,
I don't know who in the log cabin Republicans is going to buy this now, considering what they've all gone through recently.
okay. So let's set the stage quite literally. Donald Trump hosted the log cabin Republicans at Mar-a-Lago on December 15th. This was 2 days after the Respect for Marriage Act had been signed. So, legal protections on federal and state governments in recognizing same-sex marriage. Donald Trump stands up in front of the log cabin Republicans, the gay and lesbian caucus within the Republican Party, and says, "We are fighting for the gay community. We are fighting and fighting hard. With the help of many of the people here tonight in recent years, our movement has taken incredible strides. The strides you've made here is incredible." Now, first of all, let's do some grammar parsing. We don't know who Donald Trump is talking about when he says, "We are fighting for the gay community." He has a split record in office of advancing LGBTQ issues while at the same time pulling back on certain recognition of LGBTQ needs within the community. In addition, Donald Trump has jumped on the bandwagon of calling LGBTQ plus persons groomers. He has been very well known in quoting the rhetoric of calling LGBTQ plus people groomers. So now he's sitting in front of the log cabin Republicans saying, "We are fighting for the gay community," but he does not have the track record to show it. Secondly, we are fighting and fighting hard. Well, the only thing that we've seen hard fighting on from the Republican Party is to pass anti-trans, anti-gay legislation. So we don't know that we're absolutely seeing them fighting hard for gays, but obviously fighting against the LGBTQ plus community.
Well, and
Finally,
he says that we're fighting hard. The things that you've done here are great. So he says that we are fighting, and then he attributes it to the log cabin Republicans, the LGBT community, and the strides that they have been making, essentially trying to take credit for the work that they have been doing to advance LGBT rights.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Okay, he says, with the help of many of the people here tonight, the log cabin Republicans, our movement has taken incredible strides. Now, let's take a step back and let's ask this question. What movement is Donald Trump referring to? Because the only movement that Donald Trump has been generating any movement in would be the Make America Great Again organization that is somehow associated with groups like the Proud Boys, the groups like Westboro Baptist Church, the groups like the Alliance Defending Freedom. Groups who are individually doing their own thing, but together as part of a wider movement, doing everything they can to remove the rights of LGBTQ plus persons. Mm. And so our movement has taken incredible strides with the help of the log cabin Republicans, and the strides are incredible, he says. Yes, they are. For the log cabin Republicans to sit there and eat that up is just like Turkish delight handed from the Winter Witch in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Well, and I love what the subhead of this article points out, that Trump recently referred to LGBTQ people as sickos who support the perverted sexualization of minor children. So he's towing the line of the standard rhetoric, and then when he needs the support of LGBT people, he comes around and says like, "Hey, you're doing great work. We're doing great work as a team because
Right.
we're such a great team here doing great things." It's pretty
Yeah, and we
disgusting.
know that Donald Trump is a champion of nuanced speech. So obviously he doesn't mean lesbian and gay people when he says they're a bunch of sickos. He's only obviously targeting the Democratic lesbians and gays as well as transgender people. So, Donald Trump is a master of the nuance.
I guess.
That would be Jeannie's sarcasm. Don't take that as fact.
All right, moving on to another one of our favorite people to keep talking about here. At some point, I have a feeling we're going to move on from J.K. Rowling. That's not going to be a thing anymore. I'm hoping. J.K. Rowling was recently lambasted for her Merry Turfmas tweet. I think I saw something about this, but didn't. I just basically, again, just try
Yeah.
ignoring it because there's just so much coming out of her that just is eye roll inducing. What's going on in this one?
So, it is as is. J.K. Rowling on her Twitter account put out a very simple statement of Merry Turfmas. And we know within the community that she is the queen of turfs. She gets to go up and parade her turfdom in front of the world, and everybody comes along behind her cheering and holding her robe so that she can walk through the mire that is the LGBTQ plus community. But she still wants to pretend that she's on this holy crusade, and she is above. She feels that she is above the trans community to such a degree that she could say anything and nothing would stick to her. In fact, in a back and forth battle between Jesse Earl, a trans game streamer, um, Rowling was in this back and forth claiming that Jesse Earl wanted to burn all of JK's books and everything else. But really, what Jesse Earl had said was, you know, if you enjoy the books, great. If you like the movie, fabulous. If you've got a stuffed Hedwig or something like that, great. Enjoy it, love it. Just don't buy the new game. Just don't buy the new video game that's coming out because this is doing harm if you buy that. J.K. Rowling took it personal. Why? Because it hit her in the pocketbook. Quite honestly, if the trans community and supportive allies would stand up and start hitting that pocketbook, we would probably see her believe that maybe she's not as high and mighty as she thinks. But this is what it was. Her saying Merry Turfmas was proving that she could walk above the trans community and no one would give a shit.
Oh, darn it. For one of these stories, I'm going to get a smooth transition. I'm going to be really happy about it. GOP Congress members who campaigned against grooming vote against a child sex abuse bill. What was this bill, and what's the nuance here?
The bill, entitled the Respect for Child Survivors Act, was developed so that children who had been the victims of sexual abuse could be, in their case, could be investigated without traumatizing that child over and over again through the investigative process. It was an effort to bring different aspects of the investigative process through law enforcement, mental health professionals, medical professionals, family advocacy, child advocacy workers, prosecutors, bring all these people together and create a way so that that child who was the victim, the target of that abuse, would not be re-traumatized by the experience of having to go through that over and over and over again. Now, the funny thing is who sponsored this bill. It was introduced by Senator John Cornyn of Texas, a Republican, Chris Coons, a Democrat from Delaware, Lindsey Graham, and Amy Klobuchar, who is a Democrat from Minnesota. And it passed the House with 215 Democratic votes and 170 Republican votes. Passed the House with Republican votes. But 28 Republicans voted against this bill, including Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Louis Gohmert, Paul Gosar, and Rick Crawford. All of these people have been very much in opposition to the expansion of LGBTQ plus civil rights and have used the grooming slur to describe LGBTQ plus people. So these individuals who have been very loud about saying, oh, we need to protect children. We need to guard against the sexualization of children. We need to somehow, make sure that kids are protected from this. Turn around and said, well, this bill does not do the job. They want to live in the fantasy world that if they can get rid of transgender people, that children are never going to be sexually abused again. If they can get rid of homosexual people, then children will never be abused again. But the statistics hold up that it is cisgender individuals who sexually abuse children in a vast outweighing majority. It is not homosexual. It is not transgender. It is cisgender heterosexual individuals who make kids victims. But because they want to maintain their narrative, because they want to create a villain out of the LGBTQ plus community, they are going to stick by their guns, even at the expense of children.
Let's move into some interesting paranoia news as we try and figure out what's going on here. Lauren Boebert says the omnibus bill will sexualize her sons. Even though this bill doesn't affect anything within 1,000 miles of where she lives. What is going on here, Genevieve?
So the omnibus bill that was passed was basically just a bill to secure funding for the coming year so that the federal government could continue working through the transition into 2023. She came out and she says, why do you want to sexualize our children? I have 4 boys, and this law is targeting children of their ages all across America. Now, she then explains that there are grants, small grants, for LGBTQ plus programs that are in San Diego and Long Island. The programs make up less than 0.00013% of the total bill's funding, and none of them impact Colorado. She says this isn't about consenting adults living their lives. I'm working hard in DC to protect the freedoms of all Americans. Bullshit. Sorry, little dust in the air here. Even though she has done everything she can to remove the Equality Act from being considered, she would ban discrimination against, or that would. She's all for discrimination against LGBTQ plus people, including transgender people. She was against the Respect for Marriage Act. She wants to see Obergefell overturned. But she's here representing all Americans and says this bill funds the sexualization of our children, and this is disgusting. It's un-American, and it's wrong. Even though she's the poster child for education reform.
And that's just because there are a couple programs in there that are LGBT or trans friendly?
Well, if anything is not pro-Republican, it is sexualizing children.
Apparently.
That's the summation of it. If anything is not a Republican hardcore Republican value bill, if there is even, if there's a Democratic semicolon in there, it's sexualizing children.
Because that's the narrative. I understand.
Yeah. I mean, look at Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz wants to do the same stuff, and then he turns around and he denounces shit that he voted on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, Ted, honey, we need to work on your memory a little bit, baby. But anyway, there you go.
Anti-trans Governor Kristi Noem hid in her office to avoid talking LGBTQ plus rights with We're Here stars. What's going on here?
So Kristi Noem has been very clear that she is against LGBTQ plus rights in South Dakota, and even made the effort of voting against an anti-trans sports bill in South Dakota, only to float her own just a few months later so that she could get notoriety for it. And she has been very outspoken about, in particular, trans involvement and trans presence within the state. So when the star of HBO's We're Here showed up at her office, it was hoped that maybe they could have a conversation with the governor. Now, it was an unannounced arrival, but Amy Rambo, who's a part of We're Here, just wanted to interact with the governor on this issue. Rambo said that her dog came up to me as she came in the door, and she just jumped at an opportunity. She said she went in for a handshake with Kristi Noem and invited her to speak with the rest of the Watertown Love team, but the suggestion was brushed off. According to Amy Rambo, it's so bad she doesn't want to meet the kids she's making laws about. We are literally outside of her door. We came to her. She didn't have to come to us. At least her dog was nice. She did the old power move where you put your hand on someone's shoulder, nod, and then went to her office. So basically, she just cold shouldered a group of kids. It's the Watertown Love Group is an LGBTQ plus support organization in South Dakota. But Kristi Noem did not want to have any conversation at all with this group.
2023's first anti-LGBTQ plus bill is a deadly Don't Say Gay copycat. Where is this bill originating from, and what's going on in here?
This is in Indiana, and this is going to be a bill to restrict the discussion of LGBTQ plus subjects in schools. Now, when we're talking about this, we're not talking about just dealing with subjects, but this would be a full-on prohibition for any LGBTQ plus issues at all, meaning that if kids, are wanting to talk about, the subject, if kids want help with what is going on, they are patterning this after the Don't Say Gay bill from Florida, but they're wanting to push this a little bit further and see what they can do to possibly make more damage possible to queer kids.
What are some of the key tenets that make this one different, make this one bigger and worse than the Florida bill?
Well, in Florida, it was basically under certain ages. It was third grade and down. And those issues could not be talked about in the process of, they couldn't be taught as subjects. They couldn't be, addressed in public ways. What this is going in a classroom setting. What this is going to do is basically a kid cannot go to the counselor and talk about it. A kid could not go to the principal and talk about it. A kid could not report that they were gay and they were being abused at home, because what would happen is that the kid would be reported for speaking about that instead of the parents being investigated for abusing.
Okay. A New Jersey governor appoints the first openly transgender cabinet member. This is awesome.
Yep. Allison Myers is going to be the chair of the Civil Services Commission in New Jersey, and that will begin effective January 1st. So the governor, Phil Murphy, announced this, and this individual is going to be responsible for overseeing appeals filed by the state, county, and municipal civil service employees, candidates for employment, and appointing authorities, to do certain things within relationship to that work. So this is great that we're seeing representation in the state level, especially in a state like New Jersey. We just hope that this will continue to spread and connect with others.
It's just so interesting to report week after week on so many advancements for trans people and acceptance, and then so many negative things that are happening as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
A trans woman was arrested and accused of being a man in a dress by Texas police after she called the police for an incident.
So, Joan Simoncelli is an intersex two-spirit woman. Now, I'm not really sure how they got to that designation because there's a lot of contradiction in that, but Simoncelli was at her home near San Antonio, and she called for assistance when she was being harassed by her nephew. Her nephew was verbally assaulting her with transphobic slurs while she was outside of her property. She called the police after her nephew had punched a car window. When the police arrived, they then began to accuse her of filing a false report. Now, they took her into custody. They placed her in I may be thinking of the wrong one there. No, they didn't take her into custody. They accused her of making a false report. They filed a report against her. Her court case, which was supposed to take place in early December, was delayed and delayed and delayed, and now has been postponed. The nephew had nothing done to them. The one who had perpetrated the assault, the one who had committed violence, nothing was done with that individual. But here's an individual who, because she was in her property, on her property, she was falsely arrested by the police after she called for help. So again, this is in Texas. I don't want to keep saying this, but Texas, come on. The official arrest report was making a false report. But the thing is that criminal charges against her failed to recognize the assault that was done and the injustice that was perpetrated on her by the police in bringing her into custody. So we have to, this is one of those justice issues that we have to be loud about. We have to get up and say, look, these charges should be dropped. The deputies who were a part of this need to be called into account for this. Because if she was arrested on making a false charge, then where was the investigation into the individual who was doing the harm toward her?
And as it was pointed out in chat, this sort of thing is happening more and more frequently. We're seeing a lot of this. We've reported on it recently, so it's very unfortunate. 2 women were arrested for invading a gay politician's home to rant about drag queens. What's happening here?
So we mentioned New York City Council member Eric Botcher a couple of weeks ago, and he has been bouncing around the news a little bit, especially when it comes to protesters, individuals who are protesting against, in particular, drag performers and drag events. But what had happened was that Botcher had gone to an event where a drag story hour was taking place. Now, this, again, this is New York City. When Botcher arrived at that location, a group from Gays Against Groomers, a group of protesters from Gays Against Groomers, was at that location. Afterwards, the group then targeted Botcher's office, and then 2 individuals moved toward his house and began to write slurs and vulgarities on the sidewalk in front of his house. The ones who were riding on the sidewalk then broke into the building, into the lobby of the complex where Councilman Botcher lives, and the building superintendent had to call the police and have them arrested. So, I mean, this is kind of getting a little scary around here. Yes, we know that the protesters are out there, but we also know that they are stepping up their acts of violence and hostility.
Oh, no, that didn't work. Let's see. I'm going to get a smooth transition one of these days. It's going to happen. Hate Pastor says his church has to relocate after their latest landlord has refused to renew their lease. This is some very good news. What's going on as we dive deeper into this one, Genevieve?
Pastor Jonathan Shelley and his Steadfast Baptist Church are being evicted. Now, this is, I think, the second or third time that they've had to move. But what it is that as they become very outspoken, as they come out and being very violent in the ways that they speak about LGBTQ plus people and how they oppose them, it's harder and harder and harder to find individuals who want to lease property to these churches, because as protests increase around these churches, as negative press increases around these churches are going to be associated with these properties, and therefore the property values are going to go down. So those who are those who are leasing the property to these churches, we see them now beginning to back away and saying, no, this is not the kind of stuff that we want. So yeah, couldn't happen to a nicer bunch of people.
Well deserved, well deserved. This one's an interesting one. A conservative pundit says that LGBTQ plus people want right-wingers to murder drag queens to get a drag Floyd. Drag queens are a provocation, he says. It's been an escalating provocation.
So James Lindsay is an anti-LGBTQ plus activist. He calls drag queens groomer clowns and says that drag queens, drag performers, are part of an unconventional warfare tactic to provoke conservatives into killing someone. he says that they are looking to provoke conservatives into killing a drag performer or a transgender person and then lifting that individual up as sort of a George Floyd for the drag trans community. And that the line that Emily quoted, drag queens are a provocation, and it's been an escalating provocation. This is an unconventional warfare tactic to provoke. He said the real goal is to teach kids living queerly and strategic defiance, and to get adults to either accept their methods or to react too harshly against them on video in order to smear such opponents as inciters of anti-LGBTQ plus hate. The goal is to get you to give in so they get their way or they overreact. It's so important to understand that they want a drag queen to get attacked. They want to make a huge amount of hay of it, and they want to create summer 2020 again off a drag queen or trans person or something like that.
Okay, so first off, there's a lot here, but the two main points I want to make is victim shaming or victim blaming, saying that LGBT folks are bringing it on themselves, and it's the purpose. That's their intent, is to bring this violence against themselves. And second, how many more trans and LGBT people do we have to report on dying before one of them would be the George Floyd? I mean, we talk about this every week. We talk about this not every week, but we talk about the violence. At least we talk about when people are murdered a lot of the times, and it happens a lot. So I just don't get how anybody can buy this sort of a claim.
So my argument, my counter argument, is that we just had Club Q in Colorado Springs, which is the home base of Focus on the Family. If there were going to be a George Floyd type event, Club Q would have been it.
Or Pulse.
Well, but see, here's the thing. In the years since Pulse, the hate has grown so much more.
Mm-hmm.
This appears as a targeted event. This appears as an event where individuals, in particular drag performers and trans people, were being targeted. If there's going to be a George Floyd event, it's going to be the fact that 5 people, including trans and drag representatives, were murdered in a terroristic act. If there were going to be an event, Club Q should have been in.
Mm-hmm.
But what have we seen since then? We have seen people who are anti-LGBTQ saying this is a great start. This is just the beginning. This wasn't enough. But we have also seen no overt reaction by anyone to claim that this violence needs to be stopped. When the owner of Club Q sat before a House committee to talk about the violence against the LGBTQ plus community, the Republicans sat there and said it is no different than the violence that is committed against anybody else. So there is no reason to sit here and glorify it. I contend that we are not going to see an outcry against this type of violence until we see a mass murdering of LGBTQ plus people. And when I say that, I'm talking in the hundreds or thousands. That is my contention, because that's what it took to wake up the countries of the world to look at Germany and say, what the fuck is that guy doing?
Mm-hmm.
It took hundreds of thousands before the world took notice. So it'll take hundreds, if not thousands, to make an impact on the culture and have people wake up and say, this has to be stopped. Yes, it took millions at the end to recognize what they did, but it took hundreds of thousands at the beginning. It took the imprisonment of hundreds of thousands to get the world to take notice.
Yeah.
But there was still a very huge anti-Semitic movement among the countries that opposed Germany. There was still a huge anti-Semitic move in the United States, in the UK, in those areas. And so, that idea of how many is enough, we have 5. It didn't do a damn thing. So how many is it going to take?
This next one is a disappointing headline. Let's dive in and see what actually happened here. A man says that that BetterHelp referred him to a conversion therapy supporter. We've seen a lot of ads for BetterHelp and how it's a great way to find better therapy, and this seems to contradict that. What's going on here?
So BetterHelp is a digital mental health company. And as Emily said, it advertises as a way to be able to connect people who are looking for mental health assistance with providers. Caleb Hill had been kicked out of his home. It was a very conservative Christian home because he had come out as gay. He, as a practice, he was a practicing Christian. And so he was very well aware of the guilt and the shame associated with his identity. So he contacted BetterHelp because he had heard the advertisements. And he said that because it offered faith-based and LGBTQ affirming counseling, he wanted to give it a try. When he called, 22 years old, he requested LGBTQ plus therapists. He requested somebody who would be able to be sensitive to that aspect of who he was. The person that he was assigned was a Christian therapist who did not specialize in LGBTQ plus issues. Then the therapist wanted to focus on conversion therapy as a way of trying to get him to be in a better relationship with his family. Now, what Caleb wanted to accomplish was he wanted to somehow find a way to improve the connection with his family, but the therapist told him that in order to do that, you've got to sacrifice your family or sacrifice being gay.
Mm.
So Hill was asked by his therapist, if he had engaged in sexual acts with a man, and the therapist was quite pleased when Hill said he had never been with another man. He said, good. He said, if I did want to go back to my family, I should think hard about being physical with a man because it would be a lot harder after that. I am not going to go for the juvenile jokes, even though I could have. I'm going to go on because this is. But anyway, just so you know, my juvenile mind was working. But BetterHelp told the Wall Street Journal that it has nearly 30,000 therapists nationwide and has served more than 3 million patients. It doesn't accept insurance, but it provides patients with once weekly counseling sessions and messaging per month for $240 to $360. The profitability of this seems to be quite healthy as they reported a $1 billion annual revenue last year. So there's a huge question about how this program, how this company is really going to work if they are going to put their customers and clients in harm's way instead of getting them the help they request.
Y'all are going to love this one. This one's great. Homophobic men are just insecure about their masculinity, a new study confirms. What is this study and what's going on here?
It's nice when science finally backs up what everybody knows. Um, a study published in Sex Roles Journal suggests that men who feel uneasy about their masculinity are more likely to find homophobic and sexist jokes funny after they have had their masculinity challenged. Now, this gets complicated, okay? So, 166 men were asked questions to determine what level of precarious manhood beliefs they held. The higher a man's PMB score, the more fragile their masculinity. So, after they were asked the questions, they were then invited to take part in a role play exercise where they pretended to be employed by a comedy website and were tasked with selecting which jokes should appear on the website. Before doing this, men were given a fake personality quiz to determine whether they had more feminine or masculine personality and sense of humor. Half the men were told, supposedly, that they had a feminine personality in an attempt to threaten their masculinity. Then all the participants had to rank a selection of homophobic, sexist, and anti Muslim jokes based on how funny they found them. What the study found was that men with a higher PMB, precarious manhood belief, or more fragile masculinity, were more likely to find the derogatory jokes funny after their manliness had been called into question. Men higher in PMB expressed amusement with sexist and anti gay humor in a response to a masculinity threat because they believed it would reaffirm an accurate or more masculine impression of them. Discrimination against women and gay men, therefore, can function as a means of protecting and reaffirming one's masculinity. So, men think being homophobic makes them more manly. Again, this is one of the greatest scientifically based moments of the year.
I'm just so disappointed to see that. I mean, the LGBT stuff, the homophobic jokes, that is unfortunate, and yeah, like you said, that's something that we know. But it's just sad to hear that putting down women and selecting those jokes that infringe on women's rights, and it's just very disappointing to hear that putting down women is a way to feel more masculine in our society.
Now, I do want to say that there was a follow-up study done with a slightly larger group of participants. So it went from 166 to 221, and the results were the same. This was not a fluke. This is a trend.
Confirmed. Okay. Two-spirit joy and pain examined in a new documentary called Being Thunder.
I am looking forward to seeing this. Being Thunder is a new documentary that focuses in on two-spirit dancer Sharente Mishitashin, or Being Thunder in an English translation. Sharente Mishitashin Harris of the Nagansett tribe in Rhode Island. What this is going to do is it's going to open people up to seeing what two-spirit means within a small sampling of indigenous people. The ability of a group of people to be revered and respected within their community, even though their gender is not as attached to one or another. The idea of being two-spirit was a welcomed one in tribal communities in the past, And so being thunder is being confronted with a lot of individuals who are still struggling to accept their place within their community. So I can't wait to watch this this documentary. I'm just going to put this in here. That's the title of it. But yeah, go out and check this out. Especially if you want to be. Thank you very much. If you want to be a part of respecting and honoring, the heritage of two-spirit individuals, there's the direct YouTube link. But let me just say this. I never use the term two-spirit to describe myself, because that is not my heritage. That is not where I came from. I do believe there is a very powerful spiritual side to being transgender. I think that, in my personal beliefs, that we are a part of a greater connection of individuals who are representatives in their own cultures of transgender identities. And I think that we are connected in certain ways, but I don't use two-spirit ever to describe myself or anyone else who identifies as a transgender person, unless an individual is from an indigenous group or has been brought in by an indigenous group and recognized as such. That's the only time I would ever legitimately use two-spirit.
And that's the correct way of handling it. It is very specific to and very it's a point of pride for them, and it's for their culture, specifically the indigenous culture, the two-spirit identity. So yes,
Yeah.
it is inappropriate to use that if you're not specifically part of that community. So tangential side note, Luna says that they know that person, so we need to have some conversations offline. An angry librarian tells off conservative Christians protesting libraries in a righteous speech. What's going on here?
So, the Patmos Library in the Jamestown Township of Michigan was closing early. And a library board meeting was being held, and a librarian from that institution showed up at the meeting and was asked why the library was closing early. Now, here's one thing that I want to warn you all. This is a public safety announcement. Never piss off a librarian, because I can promise you that a librarian will be able to fuck you up with so many different words you didn't know that you will wonder how on earth you even made it through high school. But at the meeting, people were wanting to know why the library was closing early. So this librarian stands up and says, "Why did we close last week? I'll tell you. We have a breaking point. We have been threatened. We have been cursed." She said she had been working twice as many hours as normal because the library can't hire anyone due to lack of funding, because the community had defunded the library. She then said she feels like she can't bring her grandchildren to town because of the signs that people put up calling librarians pedophiles. She said of her grandchildren, "They can read. I'm a pedophile? How dare you people? You don't know me. You don't know anything about me. So we broke. Deal with it. We're human. I'm tired, and I'm tired of all of you. I moved to this town 2.5 years ago, and I regretted it every day for the last year. This has been horrible. I didn't know people could be like this. I wasn't raised this way. I'm a Catholic. I'm a Christian. I'm everything you are. But I was taught to love your neighbor as you love yourself. That's not what I hear every day. Not from you. It was one threat too many, one accusation too many. And alls we do is come in here, serve you day after day. You're welcome, and walked off. And I'm like, Mike, drop.
Instead of mic drop, she threw it at the crowd and flipped everybody
She
off
grabbed it by
and
the cable and was spinning it.
yeah, threw it at the crowd, threw up some the double deuce and walked out of there. Well, good for her. Really eloquently put, and that's terrible. And it's the thing that we see with schools as well, where the teachers, the teachers that are doing the good work, trying to help and protect kids and teach kids and do all the things that they're supposed to be doing at a paltry salary. These people aren't making much money in doing this. It's a labor of love. It's something they do to help the community and to help kids and things like that. And these insults and these things just go so far. They just go too far with it. And the threats and those signs, I feel my heart really goes out to her for living in that community and having those insults foisted upon her, and to the fact where she feels like she can't bring her family around.
Right. Yeah. It's tragic.
The Great American Family Channel. I'm going to take that again because I can. My tongue is tying, and I'm going to untie it, and we're going to get this right. The Great American Family Channel apologizes for HIV, drug, and drag race ads. Damn it.
So if you've
Can I do? Hold on. I almost had it, and then I did drag race ads, and I effed it up. So since I took it again, we're going to take it again, and we're going to get it right.
Okay.
The Great American Family Channel apologizes for HIV, drug, and drag race ads.
All right. So here's what's going on. If you've been following along for the last few weeks, you know that the Great American Family Network is one that DJ Tanner supports. She was, wanting to basically create a better movie and family entertainment environment than Hallmark, which included some gay kissing. So Great American Family was being offered up as this amazing, positive Christian alternative to the Hallmark Channel. But unfortunately, in the effort to try to move away from more mainstream type content, such as, homosexuality, transgender people, that kind of stuff, they began to air ads for RuPaul's Drag Race and for HIV medications. So here's the funny thing. Alexandra Billings, who is a fabulous representative for the community, shared on her Instagram post this post that somebody said where, love the movies, but have you removed the very non-family friendly AIDS drug ad with two men kissing? Great American Family responded with, unfortunately, we don't have any control over local commercials, and we sincerely apologize. So Alexandra goes on, she says, I've been living with HIV for over 30 years now. I buried most of my friends in my 20s, and I live with an illness that gets more and more difficult to manage and navigate with each passing year. The stigma of this disease is alive and well as long as there are humans who attempt to pass off misinformation, fear, or ignorance as normal conversation and acceptable social behavior. She says, I'm not assigning blame, and I'm not trying to suggest this is all of who you are. Your channel professes love, tolerance, and family, and I simply don't see any of those attributes in your response to this viewer. Alexander Billing is an amazing human being. If you if you're not aware of who she is, please go out there and check into that, because she is wonderful. Yep. And I believe that is also her Instagram and TikTok. By the way, she also has a new television series where she gets to play a transgender person, um, but in a much more prominent role. Emily is muted.
I need a cough button so I can just hit it and then unhit it. Uh-oh. Need to find my article again. There we go. A trans politician got engaged outside the White House as LGBTQ plus history was made. It was the perfect moment.
Yeah, so the Respect for Marriage Act was being signed, and that's the backdrop of this story. Taylor Small is the first trans person to be elected to the Vermont state legislature, and had gone to the nation's capital to attend the signing ceremony with her partner. Um, so to mark the occasion, the White House was illuminated in rainbows. As the ceremony came to a close, Russell asked Small, so the partner asked the representative if she wanted to take a photo. And then the partner got down on one knee and proposed. In a joint interview with both, Russell said, "I was just like, I want to spend my life with you, and will you marry me?" And Small said she immediately said yes and couldn't take her glove off fast enough. Um, so a beautiful moment at a beautiful time, and tons and tons and tons of love and support going out to Representative Small and her partner.
Such a heartwarming story. I love that. That's great. Good timing. Well planned by the partner. I love that.
Timing's everything.
Oh, yeah. A court rules that Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois cannot administer health plans with gender-affirming care exclusions. This is a good win. What's going on here?
Big win. And this is one of the things that we are having to really pay attention to, because the movement right now among Republicans and anti-trans advocates, we are seeing them go after the insurance companies. And that's who they're really trying to influence when it comes to barring any type of gender affirming care. They know they can't really take away the right, but they can make it impossible to gain access to that. So, what the court said is that third-party administrators that accept federal funds cannot discriminate when administering employer-sponsored health plans. That was a federal district judge basically saying that Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Illinois, you can't exclude any coverage for a medically necessary gender-affirming care, in its administration of an employer-provided healthcare plan.
Mm-hmm. Same thing we talk about a lot. If you take federal funds, you shouldn't be able to discriminate.
Exactly. It's a matter of saying, if you're going to take federal money, which recognizes that all people in the United States who are citizens have rights to access, then you cannot administer a program that is going to be discriminatory. So good on the court. Hopefully Blue Cross and Blue Shield will get its shit together. But hopefully we can also fight back against federal efforts to try and remove this. It applies to third-party administrators that accept federal funds.
New Durham Public Schools policy to support LGBTQ plus students wins accolades. What is the new policy? What's going on here?
So, queer author and a former student of the Durham public school system said that a policy such as this would have made a world of difference in my childhood. Maximilian Matthews, who identifies as queer, was bullied and taunted. At age 12 or 13, while grieving the death of his father, Matthews considered suicide. He decided against it because he's an only child and didn't want to leave his mother to grieve both losses. His father's death, the struggle with identity and sexuality, along with not understanding what was happening to him emotionally, sent him into that dark place. Now, all of this was shared after the Durham County Board of Education approved a new gender supports policy that strengthens existing rules against discrimination. It's very similar to the one adopted in Orange County in 2020, and it emphasizes the ways school leaders can support transgender and non-binary students who are most likely to be harmed by bullying, taunting, and discriminatory policies and practices. So what the school is trying to put into place is, any type of situation where bullying or harassment or discrimination is going on, school leaders can now step into that and say, yeah, we're going to make sure that this is not going to happen. This is not going to continue. This is not going to, impact our students in a negative way. Now, I'm trying to find all of the specifics of the policy, but it does represent a movement toward. We've talked so much about the don't say gay. We've talked so much about the anti-trans bathrooms, anti-trans locker rooms, all of these type of issues. But it's wonderful to see that we have a very large school district in a somewhat conservative state now taking the opposite action, going against that momentum of creating a harmful space for trans students.
That's wonderful news.
It is.
And as we wrap up tonight, I hope this story doesn't come a little too late for you. But since we're in the middle of the season of uncomfortable conversations with family as LGBT folks, here are some canned responses to use in order to answer nosy or inappropriate questions. I love this.
So I threw this one in here because, yeah, you're right. The holiday seasons, we go in and we get ask weird questions, awkward questions, sometimes inappropriate questions. But also for those of us who are on social media, we actually get those asked multiple times in a single day, if not a single minute. And so here are just some suggestions on how to respond to those individuals. First of all, don't say anything. Just let the question sit there. This is a tactic that I use quite often with the trolls in my lives. Basically, when they say something stupid, I ignore it. If they say something inappropriate, I ignore it. If they say something that is violent or potentially damaging, I ignore it. Secondly, redirect the conversation. Use a bridging message to take the conversation and the question in a different direction. Offer them something else to focus in on instead of this inappropriate area that really they have no business asking about. Do something to take control of the narrative and bring it back to a place where you're more comfortable. And finally, having some canned responses ready is always helpful. Somebody asks you a question that seems to be intrusive. I'd rather not talk about that if you don't mind. Can we talk about something else? I'm not really in a place to talk about that right now. If you forgive me for not answering, I'll forgive you for asking that.
That one's good.
Bing, bing, bing.
That one's good.
Why do you think you need to know that? I'm discreet and loyal, which is why I can't disclose that to you. But that means I also extend the same courtesy to you with the things you tell me. So basically, if you want me to spill the tea, expect me to spill the tea.
Very nice. I I specifically love and desperately need to remember, if you forgive me for not answering, I'll forgive you for asking.
That's amazing.
It is
I
so
love
good.
that one.
It is so good. It puts the thing on the, if you'll forgive me, like for my bad, I'll forgive you for yours. So it's just like this, it really softens the blow at the start and then just kind of punches it home. A little bit of a mic drop there. I love that one.
Somebody wants me to repeat that last one. I'm discreet and loyal, which is why I can't disclose that to you. But that means I also extend the same courtesy to you with the things you tell me.
I guess that's more in a case of someone asking a question about someone else.
Well, basically, it would be somewhere along the lines. Do you have sex with other people of your same gender? And it's like, well, I'll be glad to tell you, but be sure that I will smear anything you tell me.
What was that about? About Facebook? I cheated and changed my first name on Facebook, only individually. Talked to about 5 people. Okay. I was like, what's going on here in chat? But yeah, that's some great advice. I love that last little bit. I love ending there. I hope everybody had a wonderful Christmas holiday. Genevieve, did you get to do anything fun that you want to talk about on here?
I binged SEAL Team.
Nice.
Most of half of the 3rd season.
Very cool. I think that what my night is going to entail is hopping in a bath after this and seeing how much We're Here I can get through. I think that sounds fun.
Yeah, that'll work.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to go make me a hot toddy so I can go drift off to sleep.
A good drink sounds nice. I made myself. I use a recipe. I have crap ingredients, so I made myself another bad Mai Tai last night and had that with the Christmas dinner that I made. We made a big ol' ham and an 8-person serving of green bean casserole for the 2 of us, and some mashed potatoes. The green bean casserole, we have it in a big casserole dish. A small part of the corner looks like some people took some bites out of it. That's about it. We just have this huge amount of food, but it's great to have Christmas leftovers for a good long time.
You know why green bean casserole is not being attacked, right?
It's Maddie's favorite.
Huh?
It's just the 2 of us. Like, I had a decent helping of it, but it just looks like, in the grand scheme of this big old casserole dish, it's like, wow, yeah.
Well, it's because that shit's the spawn of Satan.
I'll have to make sure you tell Maddie that at some point.
I will. Because God knows she's not going to go easy on me.
It's green beans, cream of mushroom soup, which you put in everything. It always makes things great. And fried onions. Like, how can you hate that? Unless you just hate green beans.
Exactly. They're green beans. They are the nastiest things on the face of the earth.
They're not great, but there are ways to make them tolerable, and the green bean casserole is the one. I think it's the one. All right, for Genevieve Bergman, for myself, Emily, there is no Kari Aiden in the booth. She took the day off today, and we wish them well.
Kari back next week.
Yeah, they'll be back next week. So things are hopefully we'll be back to going a little bit smoother. But for Genevieve, myself, and all the mods that make this possible and do all this great work, keeping the community safe, thank you so much for coming and joining us. We love you, and I'm signing off wishing you good night and good news. Bye, everybody.